Lady Stark caught wind of me teaching one of her precious daughters to fight with a sword. All the armies in the Seven Kingdoms couldn't save me from her wrath. Arya remembered the trouble Jon had gotten into when he had taught her to fire an arrow. Girls don't need to fight, Robb had told her when he had caught them, wet blanket that he was. Protecting you is our duty. Well, I want to, she had argued back stubbornly. And naturally, Robb had proceeded to tell Lya, who had blurted it throughout the castle with her big mouth. Arya could not be sure who it was that had told her mother and father, likely Sansa, yet soon enough that had put an end to their lessons. Had it been a sword, she thinks, it would have ended up so much worse. Somehow the picture of her lady mother chasing Jon past an army suddenly does not seem that far-fetched, and it makes her giggle. But now you are not in Winterfell, her brother continued swiftly. If you wish to eventually carry a sword on your person, you must learn to use it, and I shall help. And so long as you are here, you may ask our esteemed master-at-arms to train you with the others. I doubt she would refuse to do so for her sweet niece. Thank you, thank you, thank you. She threw her arms joyfully around his neck and peppered his face with kisses. So how are we to start? Will you spar with me? You will not be sparring with anyone for a long time, little sister. Jon laughed. First you need to learn balance and then some simple thrusts and parries. And I will warn you, I will not go easy on you. This is not a game. If you are to learn to fight from me, you will learn it well. She looked at him seriously. I will do whatever you ask me to. I swear it. Then let us start, he grinned. 3 weeks later in Moat Cailin. Jon Snow. He stands in his hall, appreciating all his mother had done to set up this gala. The part he least appreciates, however, he decides while tugging at the collar of his fancy silk doublet, is how he must dress. You are a lord now and you must look it, mother had insisted. So gone were his soft linens, replaced with silk that itched against his skin. There he is. Jon felt a heavy hand pound at his back. The firstborn son of Eddard Stark, ruling all of Moat Cailin. My lord father sends his congratulations on the first of many successful shipments we have sent to Braavos, my friend. Osric, he received the youngest of the sons of the Lord of the Last Hearth welcomingly. Pay my warmest regards to the great Jon. While not quite yet the giant his father or older brothers had grown to be, the young Umber posed an impressive figure in his own right, towering over half a foot above any other man in Moat Cailin. He had the same strong brows that ran in his family and complemented their heavily muscled frame. Osric was in a good mood, Jon noticed. And certainly taking full advantage of the festivities, if the half-empty cup hanging from his hand was any indication. Whatever else one can say about these scrawny Dornishmen, his words slurred slightly, as he grinned red-faced. They know their wine. That they certainly do. Jon agreed politely, while silently reflecting on the trade deal the two of them had closed. Timber was the greatest resource the North had to offer, and the Braavosi needed every chunk of wood they could find to maintain their mighty fleets. The issue, of course, was the Mandaealis already held dominion over the largest Issozi buyers for generations. It had taken considerable back and forth to convince even the smaller factions of merchants to entertain their offers as it stood. Little victories, Jon is forced to remind himself in those brief moments of frustration. They will not gloss over me for much longer. I wished to speak to you on the matter of Moat Cailin's master-at-arms. Lord Osric corners him boldly, and Jon guardedly nods at him to continue. It is an insult, Jon. He rumbles lowly. You see that, surely. By what right should Lady Mormont be placed above me? After all that they have done to shame our people and disgrace Lord Eddard Stark. They should feel lucky enough they were not stripped of all their titles as they ought to be. Osric had enough duties that he would hardly take up a post as master-at-arms. But he had expected to be offered the role nonetheless, even if merely ceremonial, so he could turn it down, and not doing so had perhaps been Jon's first misstep. The current sentiment regarding the Mormonts was hardly unique to the Umbers in the north, Jon thinks displeased. Yet all the same, he would not have dared be so brash in his words to Lord Benjen. I am not in the habit of judging sons for the crimes of their fathers, Jon says evenly. Nor do I believe the Mormonts should suffer for the crimes of their lord. Whatever Jorah's many sins, Lady Mage and her daughters are as fine as any other Northman, and they have stood at my side through adversity bravely. Even still, Osric rumbles on, full of misgiving. How could you think Lady Dacey would make a better warrior than me, a woman and a cripple too? Battle is not her place. She would be a sword arm greater had she learned that much. You are a fine warrior, Osric, he mollified. The finest in Moat Cailin as it happens. But you are also gifted in ways that many never will be. It matters less how well a master of arms fights and more how well they can teach. And while Lady Dacey certainly can no longer match your skill with a blade, she has fought at war, which is more than most can boast of. Who has she ever taught to fight who is worth anything? Osric scoffs. Jon feels his patience wearing painfully thin. He knew very well what the Umbers thought of a woman's place, a notion shared by many Northmen, however fervently he disagreed. Every man and woman ought to be able to defend themselves if they wished it. More than anything he had little desire to see those attitudes escalate in Moat Cailin, not when it would be him dealing with the fallout of any turmoil that they wished to start with the Mormonts or Dornish. After all the tireless effort he had exerted for months to finally establish order, the thought of Osric Umber ruining it all with a carelessly uttered word sends a deep fury to his chest. She taught me, Jon reminds him, picking at his nails. And I do not doubt you remember from our last match just what I am capable of with a sword. Of course the older boy backs down, seemingly unnerved by the edge in his tone. A well-fought bout as always. The truth is that I will soon have need of you in matters of far greater significance. He takes a deep breath, content to bury the harshness with sweeter sentiments now that his will has been established. You are my eyes to the east, my voice to the last hearth, and I would not distract you with such petty roles unbecoming of your status. When the time is right we will bring the rest of the free cities to our door, but I will require much of you. Can I count on it? That you can, Jon. Together. Osric grasped his arm tightly, once more all smiles. Your mind has never failed us before, and I hold no doubt winter sport will become the envy of the coast. I would toast to it even, yet it seems I am out of wine. I did not take you for the bashful sort, Umber. Jon grins. Go on and pour yourself a generous cup or two. Enjoy tonight well, you will lack for nothing while in my home. No need to tell me twice, my lord. He laughed heartily. Though you may regret your generosity on the morrow when you are met with a bear seller. Once he has departed, Jon notices another pair of Northmen approach him to pay their respects. Lord Eldilin Dunmquil and his eldest son Sinan, heir to the grasslands. Lord Dunmquil, welcome. I have been meaning to find you tonight. Jon strikes up a conversation as the older man walks alongside him. I was recently told of the farmer in your territory who forfeited his land. I wish for the less fertile portions to be turned over to grow flax. Flax, Lord Eldilin repeats thickly as if he was sure he had misheard. We already grow it, Lord. We do, Jon acknowledges. But I wish for more, and that land has proven lacking to our usual methods. I can think of no better use for it. He remains silent, caught by surprise at the demand, and Jon could not fault him for his seeming reluctance. If lumber was the North's most valued commodity, livestock was a near second. It was common practice throughout the North that regional lands not suitable for arable crops be put to use sustaining livestock instead. And Lord Dunmquil's family had made a living breeding rocks, horses, and the most plentiful of all, sheep, for generations. No doubt he expected to use the lands to expand that purpose. If there was one thing Jon knew of his people, it was that they tended to be set in their ways. They would prefer to grow whatever measly crops they could pull from this dirt long before they would wish to produce something with as little intrinsic value as flax. Even one extra crop or one better fedrock meant a little more to feed a family through winter, they would say, while what were they to do with extra cloth? And yet the calculation was simple in Jon's mind. Sheep provided more than lamb or mutton for the dinner table. They were perfect for herding in the foothills for wool. Along with the flax he had the perfect recipe to produce linen, thread, and woolen cloth right at home at a scale far greater and cheaper than the South could. On the other hand, no matter what exhaustive efforts he exerted, the lands around Moat Cailin would never match the reach for effectiveness in producing crops. Rather than force a square peg into a round hole, why should he not focus on his land's strengths? Flax was far easier to grow in poor soil, and if Jon produced the textiles in mass to be exported, he could simply use the extra coin he would generate to import the same crops at much cheaper prices from the Reach. If it is the compensation you worry about, Jon suggests. I am more than willing to negotiate what you deem to be a fairer cut. You are the blood and word of the Starks. Lord Dunquil refuses then without hesitation. That is enough for me. It shall be done, Lord. Jon nods his thanks, quietly appreciative of the Horse Lord's refreshing straightforwardness and compliance. I beg your pardon, Lord. He interrupts suddenly and Jon wonders what is on his mind. I try not to speak on matters that are not my concern, and yet I find this once I cannot hold back. I heard of that nasty business with Lord Fowler, and I confess I found the whole deal truly appalling. To rebuff your overlord in that manner. He shakes his head, both veritable dismay and thinly veiled distaste clear on his face. The audacity is unthinkable. You ought to be careful of that one. Some nobles work hard to serve their kin and country. Others tend to be more ambitious. The Dornishman has proven he cares little for our people or these lands. He only wishes to make every penny he can off our backs. I say this only because a young ruler such as yourself must learn who his real friends are, especially when that number thins as winter comes to pass. Privately, he could not disagree. After Jon had learned of the extortionate prices Lord Fowler had been taking from merchants to sell his goods, he had set a meeting with the Dornish lord insistent that the practice stop immediately. While he had eventually gotten all he had come for, namely a sharp reduction to the price of bread and all other produce that he deemed essential, it had not come without ceding that Lord Garrison still be allowed to maintain a strong tariff on the various luxury items that were imported in. A favor for a favor keeps a king on his throne, Mother had always preached. And it hurt Jon little to see such a small request allowed. Those who could afford such items were more than capable of paying the tax. And Garrison Fowler was his most powerful banner, prideful and ambitious but with a voice reaching as wide as the Lord of Skiriach and the Prince of Dorne. Yet the memory of the negotiation left him nettled. Lord Garrison's entire demeanor and conduct had irritated him, as well as if somehow he had seen the both of them as equals instead of a lord and his vassal. I am much obliged by both your concern and friendship. Jon smiles, letting none of those feelings show. And I shall take your warning to heart, but let me also assure you, so long as Moat Cailin is in my hands, you will have nothing to worry over. The Lord gives him a deep nod and hunkers past his shoulder until it is only his son that he is left with. Sinan, Jon remembers the name. He looks to be about 6 and 10, brown-haired and dark-eyed like his father. Interestingly enough, from all Jon has heard his people say, there is not an ill word anyone would utter of him. He is said to be steadfast, loyal, and dutiful, all qualities Jon could appreciate. Your father did not much care for my plan, and yet he did as I asked of him. Jon spoke suddenly, deciding to test his mettle. I imagine that must have been difficult. Until I arrived here, he had no one that he was forced to listen to. I am curious, what would you want to do if I asked something of you did not approve of? You are among loyal subjects, Lord. The son offers cautiously. I would do the duty I swore. I do not doubt it, Jon replied without missing a beat. Yet that is not what I asked. Please speak freely, as if you were among friends. My forefathers spilled blood here as long as the Starks have ruled Winterfell. Sinan tells him earnestly after a moment of silence. Longer if you believe some of the tales. They were buried in this soil and they have become this land. So in my heart, I would always wish to do what would serve her best. Even if I was forced to oppose you to do so, Jon finished musingly. If that was truly what made him tick, that was a motive Jon could more than work with. Well stated. You will be happy to learn Moat Cailin's best is an ambition that we share, Jon remarks. Though I hope my actions will speak for me. The boy bows low when Jon excuses himself, heading for the refreshments. He pours himself a generous cup of Arbor Gold, his first of the evening, while reflecting on his northern lords. Osric had always been familiar to him from his many visits to the last hearth. His youth made him bold as much as Lord Eldalin's age lent him to caution, but both remained old-fashioned and stubborn. Still, having spent his entire life in the north among men like them, Jon felt strong enough of their loyalty and of his handle on keeping them under control. Thoughtful tonight, are we, Lord Snow? A teasing voice interrupts and he looks up to find the one and only Lady Nymeria has joined him. Her viper black eyes turned to him appraisingly before she curtsied in a polite greeting. You have a most wonderful home. I have traveled across most of Dorne and I can say with certainty there are very few castles quite like this one. John hadn't known what he had expected from the prince's daughter, but it certainly wasn't the woman that had ridden down to his castle on a golden mare all those months ago. Lady Nym looked to be 8 and 10, and she was beautiful. At certain moments she even reminded him eerily of her cousin, Princess Rhaenys, what with their high cheekbones, full lips, and pretty olive skin. Today she had worn a yellow silk gown so fine that John could see straight through the fabric, and it took every ounce of his effort not to look away, or worse, get caught letting his eyes wander. "Well met, Lady Sand," John returned, raising her hand to his lips for a kiss while praying she couldn't see how red his cheeks were flushing. "You are of course always welcome to share in Moat Cailin's hospitality. Our guest quarters have long been left wanting." "The offer is very much appreciated." She turned him down without hesitation, just as she had before. "But I am quite comfortable with my current accommodations." She was residing with Lady Jenlyn Fowler, John knew. One of the twin daughters of the old hawk, Lord Franklin Fowler, who had come to support her uncle and cousin in their move north. Lady Jenlyn had made it quite clear her presence in Moat Cailin would be a temporary one. Sooner rather than later, John imagined she would return to her home in Skiriach. And yet Lady Nymeria had offered him nothing self-same. The truth was she was simply a puzzle that John could not solve. For 6 moons she had stayed in his home, and yet in all that time she had not once approached him with any request. Not to claim any land, not for a seat or voice at his council, and not for any ventures on behalf of the Martells. Nor had John had any luck in his attempts to win her to his side rather than that of the Fowlers, not when she seemed attached at the hip to Lady Jenlyn. Which was not to say she was distant either. Lady Nym seemed rather intrigued by his sister Arya, and John knew how much she respected his mother, remembering how she had laid a kiss on each of her cheeks the day she had arrived while proclaiming the great lengths Prince Oberyn had spoken glowingly about Lady Ashara. He even noticed her observing him on occasion, simply watching everything around him as if she were taking the measure of them. As if she were searching for something. What's her angle? He found himself pondering more often than he ought to. Everyone has one. I am sure the Red Viper was glad to hear that you have settled without a hitch. John hummed. In the odd case that he was still left wondering how you have taken root so far from Sunspear. My father sends me nowhere, if that is what you wished to know. She quashed bluntly, though given her easy demeanor John decided that insinuation didn't seem to bother her. Then what are you doing here? John wondered out loud. If you would permit me the question, my lady. You see, my younger sister, Elia, has always been mad for horses, the girl said, a smile playing on her lips. And once she heard of the magnificent creatures up north that could power through rock and snow, well, our tiny sand steeds back in Dawn couldn't quite keep her curiosity pinned. But the cold doesn't quite suit her mother, so I agreed to watch over her instead on this little trip. You needn't worry, she will grow bored of your home soon enough and return to Dawn with her next mad idea. Tease just how she is. John did not doubt the tale. He had met the rambunctious and troublesome child after all, whose desire for a tour of their stables had been the first words he had heard out of her. Yet he did not miss Lady Nym's curious choice of words either. She will return to Dawn soon enough, Nymeria had said of her younger sister, and yet she had once more made no mention of her plans. And the more he played the words in his head, the more confident he grew that she had given him something new cloaked within the tale. You say it is your sister that was curious, but I think the reason you came along with her is that you are as well. John pushed forward his theory sharply. You are curious about me. Am I right? Your aunt spoke true, it is plain to see. Nymeria laughed. It would seem your mind is just as deft as your blade, Lord Snow. Perhaps I am curious. Could I be blamed for it? It is not every day you hear of a boy becoming a lord and trying to unite two peoples, let alone one who is still a bastard. It is never actually. And as Lady Elaria has so often claimed, us bastards ought to stick together when given proper cause, do you not think? John hears the words she did not say as loud as the ones she did. What makes you so special? How did a single northern bastard defy thousands of years of tradition to find himself lording over his own kingdom? She was curious about what John had to offer, but to whom, he finds himself wondering. Herself? Dawn? The answer has only created a dozen more questions. It is as you say, he offered plainly. I am not the kind of lord you see every day. You will see all that I have to offer if you stay long enough. Somehow I doubt anything is ever quite so simple around you, Lord Snow. Nymeria expresses, before excusing herself to find her sister. And yet I can divulge I am fascinated to see what comes of this most curious arrangement. He pours himself another cup, feeling the taste of the bitter liquid take over his tongue as he scans across the room. It is a lone figure that catches his attention then, sitting casually at the edge of the room robed in boiled leather topped with furs, a quiver of arrows at her side. The simple outfit made John feel exceedingly overdressed, and yet that had always been the Mormont style. Lyra, he sits down beside her, finally letting his carefully cultivated mask fall now that it is just the two of them. You realize this is a feast, not a hunt, do you not? There is no cause to be sitting by your lonesome nursing weaponry. Drink, eat and enjoy the night. You and Lyra do enough mingling for the three of us, she replies with a faint smile. And you needn't worry, I have been more than properly entertained waiting to see if you would ever finally finish drooling over the prince's daughter. I did not drool over her, he denies defensively, ashamed of having been caught doing exactly that. Lady Nym is a very important piece that I have to get on board if I am to move toward the Moat Cailin Iron Vision. I have heard it all before, she waves him off. Spare me the sermon. Your wish to build something different. A little utopia that accepts men from all kingdoms, the poor and the rich, men of all gods and what not. So you do understand. And you still wonder why I need to gain her loyalty. He cuts steadfastly. Or perhaps it is only faith in me that you lack. He can hear his sister laughing like a ripple of sunshine alongside Illyria as Lady Nym entertains them in the distance, and as Lyra's line of sight follows him, there is an unflattering expression that he just cannot place spelled across her face. John did not know what it was about the Dornish woman that inspired such fierce aversion in his friend, not when in all the time he had known her she had always remained so laid back and relaxed. His twin had speculated once that Lyra held a fondness for him, and John suddenly found himself wondering if it were true. He hoped not. Lyra was certainly pretty in her own right, what with her startling blue eyes and wild hair, but John had never felt an attraction to her in that manner. She had always been like an older sister to him in Bear Island, filling the void that he had felt glaringly with the absence of the Starks. She pursed her lips. I care for you, you know. We have known each other for a long time, and sometimes I worry that you do not know your limits, like the whole deal with Jorah. She finishes low as a whisper, and John feels himself tightening up involuntarily. You are only the Lord of Moat Cailin. She continues briskly. You remember that, do you not? You have men who support you, the finest castle in all the north, and you will have good income collecting toll from all those who wish to cross the King's Road for the rest of your days. And yet tell me I am wrong when I say I know none of that satisfies you. Sometimes I doubt if anything will. I try to protect you from yourself because you certainly will not do it. All this business with the Dornish royalty and expanding trade to the south. I know of your ambitions and resolution, but it is trouble. Lady Nymeria Sand is trouble. You are begging to get yourself embroiled in affairs that do not concern you again, and this time not even Lord Stark's name will get you out. John turned away from her, loath to consider the prospect, yet doing so all the same. Is it so bad, she questions keenly, to keep your head low for once? Perhaps your counsel will ring true, sour as it is to my ears, Lyra. He tells her. But that is a risk I fear I must take. But you can trust me that whatever is to happen, this will not be anything like Jorah. This time I have everything perfectly under control. Let me worry about Lady Nym. I just need to know that you of all people will have my back. You are the only one among them that I can trust without a doubt. So long as you are sure, she gives him a sideways smile. And you know I shall always have your back. I was counting on it, in fact. John's lip twitches upwards. Because there is something I require from you. Of course you do, she snorts, a tired look in her eyes. I do not know how I thought I could get you to stop. Does that big head of yours never tire of ideas? Now that the plans had been communicated with Lord Eldilin to build their supply of wool and linen, John needed to turn his eyes toward production. It was only after they were prepared into the various styles and designs of dress and tapestries that they gained their appeal in trade. John recalled with ease how many hours his sisters would spend locked in a room growing up, dressing each other up in the latest fashion or trends, and how they would come to him or Rob after to judge whether their new gowns were pretty. He had little doubt that many noble ladies across the realm shared that pastime. And while the raw materials were abundant across the north and not particularly profitable to trade, not every kingdom had the proper infrastructure to prepare fibers to make cloth right at home as John did. The water wheel. With all of the lovely rivers flowing in from the salt spear, Moat Caillin's terrain provided the perfect natural advantage to use the flowing water as a means of powering their mills and foregoing more tedious manual efforts. It would require a sizable investment, yet the payoff was obvious. The mills would remain a valuable source of tax for as long as they stood, and their use suited many purposes. Beyond processing thread for cloth, they could also be used to grind grain or with sawmills to cut logs into lumber in mass. The latter was an avenue John eventually intended to exploit, just as he had promised Osric Umber, to narrow the gap that was the Mandaealis advantage on the eastern coast. It was a scheme for another time, but John had already begun to consider the benefits and incentives he could offer to grow local carpentry and woodworking. It was not only his coffers that would benefit from that plan, but all the north, John speculates. The more demand Moat Caillin could meet for timber, the more land across the north would be cleared for farming and livestock. It was common reasoning that more mouths would be fed as a result. And the more people the north could support, the more laborers they had to undertake greater projects. A cycle of growth. And as that came to pass, John could put the coin he was sure to have made to good use, bettering his father's lands. He could provide the Starks with expensive glass imported from Myr, in exchange for generous tax breaks, of course, to be distributed to support every city, town, and hold fast. Glass gardens to grow vegetables, well-insulated barns to better protect livestock, and storehouses for grain would be commonplace, not just a luxury installed in castles like Winterfell like it currently remained. Mills Lyra mulls over the idea, interested yet not entirely certain. We did not have any on Bear Island. I would not know where to start. You needn't concern yourself on that front, John returned with Shorty. So long as you agree there was a miller or two near Winterfell whose services I was able to procure. The rest can be taught. Finding the right men experienced in the construction of one proved the harder task, but I have secured all that is required to that end as well. Very well, she assented. If you have done so much, I can hardly refuse you. Send them over and I shall see it done. And with that, there was one final piece that John needed to finish this puzzle, one final lord he had to corral. Lord Garrison Fowler. John finds him with his son, both standing out with their wispy yellow hair and dressed in the finest of silk robes complete with a jeweled belt. An opportunity, John tells him while delivering his pitch. To expand their common interests along the south. If there is one thing he has found the Dornish lord to appreciate, it is the chance to line his pockets. And that is exactly what John offers. It shall be done, my lord. I shall inform my brother of our endeavor and he will have no reason to refuse. He proclaims, immediately all business. And I would of course be happy to provide my finest craftsmen as you require. It was not craftsmen that John needed of him. Not from the Fowlers, who were out in their landlocked kingdom while Starfall sat at the mouth of the sea brimming with talented young artisans. He had already inquired and found several men who he deemed proficient in imitating Dornish satins and silks, Myrish carpets and lace, as well as Kohuric tapestries alike. John had no cause to try and match the quality of the original. So long as he offered a cheap enough price, the market for his fabrics would remain strong. And while no Essozi goods could compete given the cost of their transportation, the great houses of the Reach and West had plenty of resources to copy John's strategy and better it if they desired. That was where the Fowlers came in, distribution. The final and perhaps most crucial component of his plan. John had the overseas routes to Dorne covered through Starfall, but Lord Franklin was the warden of the Prince's Pass, the main overland entrance connecting the southern kingdoms to Dorne. So long as they were given proper incentive, the Fowlers could levy tariffs on any incoming goods, letting John maintain an iron grip on the Dornish textile market. I would be happy to inspect the number of them, John says anyway, content to humor him now that he has gotten what he wished. They speak further, shifting to more ordinary topics, and John can tell the Dornishman is pleased with him. You have a boldness to you, Lord Snow. Lord Garrison Lords. I did not expect it, but it gladdens me to see. I am certain we shall have much success together. John simply nods, unsure where he intended to go with his line of probing. And yet he accentuates purposefully, I must disclose I was surprised you were able to get our Lord Dunmwil to acquiesce so readily to using those lands for flax when he already had such a detailed project underway. Project? He thinks confused. How could any project have possibly been started there? The lands had only just come free. My lord did not know. Lord Fowler asks with feigned surprise. The horse lord started setting his stallions across the old farmer's way with plans to breed the best of them with the extra vegetation, poor as it was. I suspect he wished for hardier beasts to survive the upcoming winter. I would have thought a good Northman would have let his liege share in those aspirations. Animal rearing had been something that John had looked closely into with as much livestock as he had under his jurisdiction. He had been trying for months to recruit Ricard Riswell, Lord Roderick's second son, to take up in his lands, thus far to no avail. The Rills had long been known as the keepers of the finest horses in the realm, and he had seen the effort as part of a strategic backing to grow Moat Caillin's horse farming and breeding. If the horse lord had brought such plans to him, John would have happily supported the efforts. So why would Lord Dunmwil have concealed it? Hardier, bigger beasts meant more milk, wool, and meat. Did he mean to skim profit from John by keeping the more valuable livestock for himself while continuing to send out the frailer creatures in trade? It is odd, is it not? Lord Garrison suggests slyly. How quickly after he wished for a change Lord Dunmwil was able to put his plans into action. I for one would be very curious to know just what it was that caused the farmer to leave. Or who. For a moment, John is unsure. Unsure what to think, do or say. And unsure who to trust. Could Lord Dunmwil have forced the farmer out? Had him threatened or harmed? He had always seemed so forthright and sincere every time they had spoken. Or could it be Lord Garrison had simply made the story up as a means of deflecting from his shortcomings, as the Northern Lord had suggested? Dornishmen did hold certain notoriety across the realm for their falsehoods, and yet John could not forget the discontent across the horse lord's face when he had announced the change. Which one of them is lying to me? Or are they both telling the truth? What do I do? Lady Ashura has spent the entire night carefully perched in conversation, only half a dozen paces behind him as she said she would, close enough to provide support if it was needed, yet far enough that she allowed him to maintain his legitimacy. The desire to turn to her for guidance is suddenly overwhelming, yet he dares not. They are studying your every tick and twitch for weakness, she had warned him. One look of indecision, one wrong word is all it takes, and soon they will begin to test your limits, challenge your interests, and perhaps even align with your adversaries. It was a game they were playing, he reminds himself. Each one trying to turn him against the other. Whatever the truth, he had to uncover it himself, but until then he would have to remain cautious of these two in particular. They were older and more experienced than all the rest combined, and that made them dangerous. That is right, I simply misremembered. Lord Eldelin was merely putting to action one of my many propositions for my livestock I brought up in conversation long ago. John Hedges. I hope you will forgive me my temporary absent-mindedness, it has been a frenzied couple of months. That I do not doubt at all, Lord John. Lord Fowler moves on, quickly and agreeable. You have been a busy man of late. I would be more than willing to do whatever little I can to help ease that burden. Young as you are, good advisers are worth their weight in gold. Those I have a great many, John concurs. And I am grateful to count you amongst that number. If you will excuse me, Lord Garrison, there are other matters I find myself faced with attending to. It is with ill-disguised relief that he has done for the night that he finds himself amid the Dane sisters minutes later. His lady mother stepped forward to straighten the edges of his crinkled doublet, and it is only when she leans closer does he realize it is an excuse to speak to him. You did well with them today, she compliments in half a whisper, approval evident. I heard it all. Ashaliria intercedes pleasantly. I ought to set out now if I intend to make it to my ship. Of course. Short as it may have been, I am still glad for your visit and tidings, Lady Ashura proclaims with a sigh, wrapping her sister in a crushing hug. Do not be a stranger, Illyria. I expect you to visit whenever you have a chance. And John, will you send for Hood and some of our men to send her on her way? There is no need to trouble any of the men. Allow me the honor of escorting you to the dock, Aunt. He quickly offered his arm and Illyria grinned, hooking her own within his graciously as they depart. Mother looked none too pleased, yet he knows she will not openly protest. Not here, while he is surrounded by those he hopes to rule. John knows what Lady Ashuradain expects of him, that he ought to have entertained his guests until they have all left his hall, and how it would look that he had not, but the truth is he can bear not a minute more. The mind games, the lies, and the egos he has had to attempt to massage over the past several hours have left him overwhelmed, feeling as if his head was barely keeping his head above water. He is desperately in need of a break from it all, John judges, just as a dull pain flits up to his temple. The time to reflect on what to make of those conversations will have to wait. So John prompts casually to his aunt as their horses trot alongside one another. Beric Dondarrion. This rumor had finally reached his ear the same way they all did, courtesy of his twin. That Lady Illyria was to be betrothed to the Lord of Blackhaven. It should not have caught him by surprise. She was 7 and 10 after all, and many ladies of that age had betrothals ensued. And yet it had. It was certainly a curious choice, a lord of the Stormlands who swore fealty to the Baratheons, not one as advantageous as John figured Uncle Aaron would have pushed for based on all his mother had told him of her brother. Nothing that has been decided for certain, she says evenly. But so it would seem. Is it a match that appeases you? He asks. For true. I hardly have reason to complain. She says, though given her large smile John thinks she is more pleased by the prospect than her words suggest. Lord Beric is handsome and an honourable man. Ned likes him well at any rate. He says Lord Dondarrion is a true knight who cares for the people in his charge. That is good to hear, he nods approvingly. Ned is a good judge of character. They approach the dock in silence, and the sight of the ship she is to depart in suddenly makes the moment all the more real. Must you leave, Illyria? He pleads, only half joking. I would carve out the most generous holdings if it would convince you otherwise. I fear I must, she grins. But I am glad I shall be missed. You needn't fret, you will be seeing plenty of me still. We are looking forward to when you and sweet Lyra finally visit Starfall. There is so much you must see and family for you to meet. In the meanwhile, I shall try to make the trip down whenever I am able. I figured you would say as much, he grumbled light-heartedly. And, about what I asked you to look into? I do not know, John. His aunt's brows furrow with doubt. Ashura has seemed perfectly like herself to me. I prodded her as much as I could, but she talked of nothing being amiss. And believe me, if my sister gets angry everyone will know about it. Perchance, you are overthinking the matter. John had shared the same doubts. Lady Ashura still came to offer him counsel. After all, she smiled and laughed and whispered stories like nothing had changed. But John knew her far too well. He was certain that she was still angry with him. That she bore resentment over something he had done, however slight, and he could not place it. I will tell you what I do know, Illyria continued, seeing the dissatisfaction color his expression. Ashura loves you with all her heart, as do we all. Whatever her anger or stubbornness, it will not last. Especially not at you. I know you worry about what the future holds, but after what I have seen these past weeks I would not give it another thought. If you are even half the lord you have been a son, I hold no doubt you will make us all very proud. John looked to the ground, unsure how to convey how touched he felt by her words. There is one last matter. I wished to ask you about Lady Nymeria, he spoke grimly. I do not know what to make of her presence here, and you know of her more than any of us. Do you think she is someone I can trust? Illyria took a moment to reflect on the question, and he could tell she was gathering her thoughts. I do not know her well, but from what I have heard and seen, the Sand Snakes and the Prince are much alike in many ways. Impulsive and without qualms on taking their pleasures and vengeance alike, Illyria stressed intently. It would do you well to remain cautious. In Dorne, she is near as notorious as her father and well respected, a princess in all but name. Even still, Nymeria has always been different from her sisters. She comes from old noble blood in Volantis, soldiers, wealth, resources. She has her own power apart from the Martells, and she knows it. She's cunning and confident, but more often than not she will speak her mind plainly. I say if push comes to shove, she is likely to be a friend rather than foe. The notion relieved him, yet John did his best not to let it show. Whatever is to happen, remember all of Starfall will have your back. She promises, stepping up closely and pressing her lips against his cheek. I wish you luck, nephew. And with that, she was gone. When John arrives at his castle, he makes out raised voices. I am telling you, Ash, Lord Ty bought it, I know. But are you sure he was properly satisfied with the details? Who else could? They both go deadly silent upon his arrival, and John does not know what to make of it, other than that he is about to receive ominous tidings. What is it? John asks of them. What has happened? They look at each other for a long moment, but it is his mother that finally pushes him an open letter. The Reach rejected your request to increase the shipments of grain. She discloses. They write that they are content to keep the agreement as it currently stands. John's brows knit together without understanding. Do they write why? The deal offered was more than fair, generous even. No, she replies. Though, I do not doubt they considered the abrupt task of doubling their orders to Moat Cailin a matter of great leverage against you. Why did you not even consult me before sending such a letter out? Double, John blanches. Had he really asked them to double shipments straight away? How could he have made such a careless, silly miscalculation? Leverage was one of the first lessons about trade that he had ever been taught. The key to expanding quantities was incremental shipments spread out among as many parties as he could manage. Perhaps ask for 2 extra sacks of grain from Old Town, 3 from Seaguard and then 5 from Starfall, slowly working the numbers up over a span of months. Asking a single seller to double what they would sell reeked of desperation. I must get that grain. He shakes his head. They will get a better deal than expected for my negligence in our negotiations, but that is a price I will have to live with. He had planned every detail of Moat Cailin's transformation to a center for production, but it all hinged on importing enough subsistence to support the difference. Yet it takes 2 to make a deal, she says bluntly. And I believe the situation may be more complicated than simply a matter of bargaining. A request of this magnitude, it is not only the Reach that word would have reached. Others in the south would hear of it as well. Others who may have incentive to interfere. Someone else, John ponders on her words. It was still possible the Reach had made the move on their own, but he had found Mother was not often wrong in her speculations. Someone who saw his request as an act of desperation and an opportunity for themselves to profit. That may explain why the Reach did not even open the discussion to negotiation. He thinks of his trading partners along the realm's western coast, those who would have the most to gain if he lost the Reach and had to turn to someone else. Old Town and Starfall can be ruled out immediately without much thought. Then there was Seaguard. Lord Mallister was known to be one of the Tully's most loyal vassals, and no doubt Riverrun would love to see him fail courtesy of Lady Caitlin. After the Reach, they had some of the most fertile soil in the realm and produced a copious amount of crops. But given their fractious vassals, John doubted the Tullys had quite enough pull to convince the Reach not to take his offer. That left Lannisport. The last John had seen it, he had accidentally left the city in bloody disarray. His uncle Ben had later met with Lord Tywine to clear up the misunderstanding and pay for the damages, and supposedly a compromise was reached. Yet he remembers the pieces of the conversation he had walked in on, bits that make far more sense now, on how Mother had seemed concerned that the Lord of Casterly Rock may secretly not have been quite as conciliatory. John did not much care what Lord Tywine held against him, not when he had grudges of his own. With one look upon his mother in the candlelight, he finds the thin scars marring the right side of her once flawless face, a sight that sends dark anger pulsing through his blood. The Lannisters certainly had the wealth and influence to reach Highgarden, and perhaps the cause. Perhaps they wished to use it to mess with his trade. To force John to turn to them and charge excessive prices for the same produce. Then I shall make the Reach an offer they could not possibly refuse. He insists assured. My horses are of better merit than any southern kingdom could raise. How long do you think you will be able to hold out against the prices they could offer? She challenges. It is a costly lesson. But only that. Unless you are fool enough to double down on the mistake. We may not be able to meet double the demand, but we will find a way to scrap enough produce and grain. You still have Old Town. We can ask a little more of them. Starfall as well, even Winterfell's stores if we must. 60% of what he needed, John anticipates, displeased. Perhaps up to 80. Enough to move along, but how many people would have to starve when winter came for the mistake he had made and the decision of the farmland he had ordered to be cleared? Even one was too great a price. I want every grain, he thinks. Every head of greens that I had set out to find, and I will get it all. John, why can you just not let it go? His mother sighs, seeing the determination written across his face. Do you not understand? Tyrell or Lannister, in the end, they are all the same. They look at us and they see outsiders while they stick together. It does not matter what they see, only what they do. This was my mistake. John begins to walk away, taut with chagrin. So I shall fix it. If you insist on doing so, I only hope you will remember this much. Patience is a virtue, my son. Lady Ashura warns after him, face contorting into an expressionless mask. Her violet eyes seem to hold no emotion, as unflappable as a rock amid a storm. Sometimes, it would do you well to let your adversaries underestimate you. Desperation provides a fool ripe for exploiting, but ambition shows a threat. John knows exactly of what she speaks. If he did what he was about to do, it would be a sign to all the realm that he wished to join the ring with the most powerful players. They had all been content enough to drop him a few scraps while he remained the nobody son of the Lord Paramount of the North. But if he began involving himself in matters of a scale larger, pitting himself in the middle of Tyrell, Martell, and Lannister along with dozens of the realm's greatest houses, he would be a fool not to understand how poorly it could go. Her warning reminds him of his friend's words from earlier that day. Would it be so bad, Lyra had asked. To keep your head low for once. It was daunting, the prospect of what John was about to do, and he felt his mouth grow dry. The realm was filled with great lords with houses of proud reputation and status, all of whom had hundreds of years of history and fealty at their back. Lords like Redwyne had entire fleets of ships that they can afford to sink without losing a moment's sleep, and the Lannisters enough gold that they could spend years setting predatorily low prices on goods to eliminate their competition. Meanwhile, he was mocked across the realm as the bastard lord whose house had no history to speak of. John had a total of 4 ships to his name that he was not leeching of his uncle, a loss of any which one would prove devastating. His gold was almost at an end between the construction of the roads and mills. And yet none of that perturbed him. It merely gave him the understanding that he needed every advantage he could get his hands on, even if he had to risk embarrassment for the chance to be what he could be. Greatness. He held the first western port the North had ever seen. He was championed by small folk made of Northmen and Dornish alike. How many lords had ever been able to say that? There was a chance of greatness in Moat Cailin, however slim, that he would be amiss not to try and take advantage of. He gazes at the ink still shimmering wet on the parchment, reading over his carefully crafted words. Would it be so bad to keep your head low for once? He could still throw the letter in the flames, John imagines, and take this last chance at doing that before it all changes for good. Cut down on the goods he had wished to produce and take whatever extra grain he could procure as Mother suggested. Jon Snow would be reduced to a peculiarity. People would whisper of Lord Eddard Stark gifting his bastard son a grand castle courtesy of the duty and love he held for Lady Ashura Dayne. And he would have to forever content himself collecting tolls from those who wished to pass by the King's Road and sapping away at whatever little he could at White Harbour's profits. A forgetful song, he thinks. How much he would prefer the chance to hear the people sing of the boy lord of Moat Cailin instead. Of his kindness, skill, and valour. Let them celebrate his generosity and daring, and let them say he was as worthy a knight as his uncle. The bastard who single-handedly turned an insignificant, northern outpost into the greatest kingdom the realm had ever known. Now that was a far sweeter melody, he judges with satisfaction, a story that could never be forgotten. Would it be so bad to keep your head low for once? The truth, he knows in his heart then, is that he would never find out. Success or failure, adequacy simply isn't in his nature. For the eyes of Mace Tyrell, Lord Paramount of the Mandaya. John tucks the letter in Maester Amon's hands. Send your swiftest birds. The matter is of the greatest importance. Notes. Chapter 16 is in. We get a little look into Moat Cailin's politics and Jon's major plans. As always, I appreciate every one of you who interact with this story and love hearing your opinions, so let me know what you think. Chapter 17, A Helping Hand. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. 295 AC, Moat Cailin. Benjen Stark. The summer snows had started to fall, and with it had come the beginnings of strife. Moat Cailin's half-built roads had been buried under snow, bringing the construction to a screeching halt and scattering his nephew's plans just as he had tried to warn the boy. Jon had not understood. He simply could not give people something and then later pull it away and expect no consequence. Yet that was what he had unwittingly done, and as men grew upset, conflicts expanded in number. That part Jon did understand. Even when the hours grew long and the number of petitioners with it, he still sat to pass judgment until every request was adequately met. The last one on this day was a Northman who had brought along his wife, who was heavy with a child, one that he was convinced was not his. "Do you have any proof?" Jon wondered out loud once the accusation had been made. "Did you catch a man slipping into your home perhaps? Or did your wife confess her infidelity?" "If not, I do not understand what you wish for me to do," Jon admitted. "I can neither prove nor disprove this claim for you." The man looked at his nephew as if he were simple in the head. What he wished, Benjen knew, was for leave to take his wife's head. It was his honor and manhood at stake. If she were to be left alive after apparently offending him in such a manner, he would consider it a great insult. And once he was free of her, the carpenter would find a new wife. Perhaps he already had one lined up. Lord Rakhard might have taken her head at the man's word if he was considered prominent enough to Winterfell's needs and her not enough for anyone to miss. That had always irked his sister beyond measure, and Lyanna's boy happened to share in her keen sense of justice. Yet Ben had understood why the North required such decisions. What did one woman matter when winter came and an entire kingdom's needs still stood unfulfilled? Sometimes sacrifice was an unwanted necessity, they knew well. Else, it was likely that Lord Rakhard would have demanded the man produce a witness corroborating the deed to give the accuser his ask. Had he failed to do so, it would have been his head that Lord Rakhard would have taken for daring to lie to his liege. Harsh yet practical. His father would have never suffered a man such as the one before him, who wasted his time on matters that held no evidence, and a little fear did well to keep the lines from growing as they were now for every little grievance or gripe. "I know it isn't mine. I know my own blood. And I'll not spend my hard-earned coin on this slattern and her bastard," he raged, and the woman flinched back. The carpenter before him seemed nothing but a brute, word-slurring and reeking of ale. If he was content enough to appear in a state like this and treat her in such a manner in front of his lord and such a crowd, gods know what he did behind closed doors. "The law bids I come to you, my lord." "So I have. Is the babe his?" Jon demands to know sternly, turning to the woman. She looks between her husband and her lord, unsure of what to say or do. "Would he orders then, bring her up to me." And the guardsman takes the carpenter's wife to his nephew's ear as they speak for a minute in long hushed whispers. Finally, he sends her back down to her husband, lips pursed, seemingly heavy in thought. "She claims the child is yours and she has taken no other to bed," Jon announces. "And as you haven't been able to produce any evidence of her cupidity, I dismiss your demand and deny the false claims you have laid against your wife." "You cannot," the man reddens deeply. "I will not have some child tell me what I am allowed to do with mine own wife. A boy who has never even taken himself in hand. She is mine and this is my right to decide." Moody as well, Ben thinks tightly. "Take his head and be done with it." "I am your lord," Jon replied with cool courtesy. "My word is law. My judgment is absolute. The laws of men." The man stood his ground, "not the laws of the gods. You must give me what I deserve." "Gods? You speak to me of gods?" Jon scoffed. "You who swore a sacred vow to take this woman under your protection. You vowed before those very gods to take her as your wife and honor her for the rest of your days, and instead at the first sign of trouble come here claiming she dishonored you with not a shred of proof to back your claim, and expect me to take her life for you for what?" Jon thunders, losing his temper for the first time since taking up his duties, and Ben can hear his voice echoing off every corner of the walls. He could not help but wonder if the woman's state had turned the matter slightly personal, a reminder of what Lord Eddard had once forsaken. "Even if what you say is proven true," his nephew continues with a harsh breath, "she will be punished, but she will not die, that much I assure you. I bet you have dishonored her in the manner you claim she has you, only too many times to count." So if I am to kill her, what then should I do with you? Am I to judge her differently, because you are a man and she is a woman? I will hear no more. You are dismissed. He should not have said that, Benjen grimaces. Don't do it, he mutters quietly, watching the various emotions flash across the carpenter's face. The man is too inebriated and discontent to leave the matter at that, as he might have when sober, and John's final words have only fanned the flames. Dornish lord. He snarled. The hall suddenly went so silent around them that they could have heard a pin drop. John froze on his way back up to his seat, paralyzed in place. It is not this whore I ought to blame, it is you. You have brought them all here, these outsiders spreading their perversions among us, and you have done nothing to put an end to it. You choose them over us, your kinsmen. The Dornishmen certainly had their odd tendencies, Benjen judges, yet John's liberated sensibilities were completely his own. Still, saying so out loud had been a mistake, whatever the boy personally believed. Because that is not how some would see it. They expected the law to be how it had always been. A man could bed whomever he pleased, a woman who was unfaithful to her husband got the sword. Perhaps it was not fair, but that is what people had known, from the tip of dawn to the edge of the wall. And when they came to their lord expecting him to uphold those traditions, he had instead brought them chaos. New rules and new laws for them to learn, which they could not make sense of. The Dornish were merely outsiders who they could see, and a convenient party to blame. Your own father would not give you his name, the carpenter continued, and it sent a twitch to Ben's face. For good reason. You give a bastard a taste of power and he wants it all. You spit in the name of the Starks, you. He likely would have said more, but Benjen had heard enough. He interrupted the rant, smashing the man's face forcefully to the floor, sending blood and half a dozen teeth falling loose. You do not speak for the Starks, he said sharply, slamming him back to the ground. And now you shall not speak at all. Hward, fetch me a knife and I shall take this swine's tongue and toss him to whichever pen he slipped free from. No, John interrupted. He walks down each step without a word, pinning the carpenter with a stony glare that looks unnervingly like Ned's. His every stride forward seems as dangerous as a beast stalking its prey, and the carpenter suddenly looks to have realized what his outburst meant. But John stops half a foot away, wrinkling his nose at the pungent smell of liquor. You will lower your voice in my hall and you will listen. If she is to come under any harm after what I've judged, I will ensure it will be your life's greatest regret, he warns, perfectly composed. Hward, take him to the jails. He will serve a sentence in labor that I find fit. He waves them off dismissively. What? What was that, John? He snaps, once they are alone and walking to his solar. You cannot just let a man come into your hall and insult you without any consequence. It doesn't matter who he insulted, even if it is his lord, John said tiredly, seemingly subdued. And it does not matter what I want to do to him either. I have told you, gone are the days where blood will shed for mere words. Moat Cailin needs the manpower to prosper, so I need it as well. That is all that matters to me. So long as he does not break my peace, he will serve his punishment in labor. So he can continue speaking of you there how he will and spreading it to the others. Benjen pinches the bridge of his nose. I understand your hesitance. It took your father some time to come to terms with dealing with such transgressions when he started out, but you will simply have to learn to do so. I am not Lord Eddard Stark if the carpenter did not make that clear enough for you. Just trust me, John declares. What I do is the best way forward. See to it that it gets done. He just won't listen, he turns away frustrated. He is as stubborn as Lionel and as single-minded as Prince Roriger was said to have been. It had upset him though, Benjen could see clearly enough what the carpenter had said. And still, he insisted on doing this to himself. Your own father would not give you his name. John was too sharp not to have realized the oddity in that. He would have never been allowed to take the name Stark for the politics it would bring forth with Riverrun and the insult it would give Lady Catelyn, but that he be given lands but not be allowed to take a new name as was custom must have weighed on him a little. Ben had agreed with the move at the time, and yet now he wondered if Ashura had been right to insist upon it. You have a name, he wanted to tell the boy. A name that all the realm bent to for nearly 300 years. Do not take his words to heart, he said suddenly, before preparing to head out. Ned would have seen you with our name if it were possible. You are as much a Stark as we are, whatever you are called. No, I am not, Jon replied, his face as blank as a puzzle, allowing a small smile. But you needn't despair over that, uncle. It hardly bothers me. I have never had any desire to be a Stark before, and I never will so long as it is not my mother who is Lady of Winterfell. I am glad to be Lady Ashera's son as much as Lord Eddard's. That much he did not doubt one bit. The boy had grown too attached to them both. Ashera rushes toward them just as he walks away to see that the carpenter is properly escorted to his cell. She should have told him by now, Ben thinks, still ruffled by her sudden about-turn. Ned may have never had any intention of telling him from the start, yet she had promised him that the first time she had approached him in Winterfell she would tell him on his 11th name day, and the time had long come and passed. Had he not done her bidding all these years for that reason alone? How his brother had convinced her he could not understand, yet when the Lord of Winterfell had come for the custom of Jon's oath of fealty the two of them had reconciled, sharing a long, hushed talk, and upon its end, Ashera had proclaimed she agreed with him it would be best that Jon not be told just yet. Best for Jon, he couldn't help but think bitterly about that, or best for them. It was a lie that he doubted was going to end the way either of them expected, yet what choice was there but to wait and see what happened? Jon Snow. Are you all right, my love? Mother questioned sympathetically, tucking one of his stray curls behind his ears by habit. What he said, it was unkind, but you mustn't let such things bother you. Jon can see a pair of servant maids hide giggles as they walk by, and his cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Stop it, he pushed her hand away, temper flaring. I have told you already, you cannot keep calling me such endearments anymore. I am a lord now, not a child. How is anyone else to respect that if my mother will not? She seemed a little hurt and Jon was sorry for it. But he was sick of her and his uncle's glances too, as if he could not handle himself. As if he needed their coddling and help all the time. Yes, you are right. I just came to say you cannot let this fester, she warns him. You changed too much too quickly and people are starting to push back. You cannot have the Northerners saying such things, not after you have spent your entire life amongst them. Let me gather your lords again. Instruct and incentivize them to offer their public show of support for you in front of all their people and see this done. There is no need, Jon brushes the offer aside. I have only recently gathered to meet with them after all. The people are upset about the lack of work and the coin they are no longer getting as a result, and I can handle that much myself. Lady Ashera's eyes narrowed dubiously as if she had got the scent of something behind his reasoning. What did the carpenter's wife say to you exactly? She asked, and Jon wished to curse. She said she did not know if the child was her husband's, he admitted to her reluctantly. And she claimed Lord Umber visited her shortly after she wed and she had no choice but to indulge him. If she admitted to that much you should have punished her in whatever way you saw fit and let the matter end at that, mother says, and Jon cannot believe it is coming from her of all people. She, who had sat him on her lap as a boy and taught him right from wrong. Why would I punish her? He asks aghast. She broke her vows, but she was coerced, trapped between men who have complete power over her. She is frightened and in need of support. Do you not see? She asks as if it were obvious. The woman thinks she is clever, feeding you this tale to buy herself time. She could not refuse him, but she does not go out of her way to name it rape out loud because it would catch her in a lie. I do not deny her husband seems a ruffian, but she has given you nothing and is wasting your efforts so she gains your protection. Doing nothing to either of them will only hurt you. You cannot say that for sure, Jon fires back. You do not know her or what happened. That is why it is my duty to investigate these matters. No, I do not know her, mother admits freely. And I know not what they get up to in the last hearth where he is solely under his father's influence, but I have enough measure of Osric Umber to know he is not a dull brute. He would never attempt something like that right under your nose and jeopardize their position when they have put so much effort to build it. And believe me, you would be beyond foolish to level such an accusation on him at only the word of a carpenter's wife. I am not stupid, Jon insists. Of course, I was not going to accuse him of anything. But that did not mean he could let the matter lie. It took great courage for a common woman to mention a noble by name, and she had done so at the risk of death. And there had always been rumors of many northern houses keeping to the first night, though his uncle had never been able to corroborate such claims. John trusted Osric, but he would still have to speak to those around the incident and reach the truth of it. And then? John wonders as discomfort settles him. And then what? A lord may love the men that he commands, Lord Eddard taught him, but he cannot be their friend. One day he may need to sit in judgment on them or send them forth to die. Had he not learned that messy lesson with Jorah? Osric was his friend and he had only spent half his life raised alongside Lyra Mormont, but they were his subjects first. If it came to it, could he do what he needed to? Whatever you do, just remember what we talked about, all right? She raises an impatient brow. Of what women can be capable of. John shifted awkwardly in place, still uncomfortable at the full memory of the said conversation. I will not forget. You are of an age now and there is no shame in finding pleasure where you will. Mother had started after cornering him in his chambers moons earlier, and John had known right then he was about to get the most embarrassing talk of his life. But I do wish to speak with you so that I can ensure you take care. She had given Lyra a separate lecture of her own, John knew, only because his sister had told him so after forcing him to share his. Mother had forewarned that girls could be just as duplicitous as any man. Told him that women often had to be deceptive and subtle and that he had to be all the more cautious who he involved himself with or trusted. A few tears or soft words cloaked in charm and innocence and he may find himself doing their bidding without even realizing it, entrapped in his feelings. He had not quite understood why said discussion had even been necessary until a young servant girl had entered his chambers one night to ask with a shy smile if she could bring him unsweetened lemon water from the kitchens or if he would have any other service of her. And when he was out surveying the farms, a fair-faced peasant girl twice his age had approached him, likely sent by her father, to ask if the Lord would care to come inside for refreshments as thanks after so tirelessly inspecting the livestock. It mattered little to him in the end. John had no desire to entertain such propositions. The only girl he ever intended to bed and wed was the one that eventually managed to steal his heart. But he had begun to notice small happenings like that nonetheless since she had spoken with him and since he had finally taken up his seat. While I have you, there was an expense in our books I did not remember approving that I wanted to bring to your attention. John approaches the subject. It says we are funding the construction of brothels all over Moat Cailin. That is not true, is it? Yes, she admits. I approved of it. Why would you do that? He asks, both incredulous and upset. There are better ways of collecting a little extra coin. The institutions themselves were hardly some revelation. Every corner of the realm had brothels so long as there was a living breathing man to accompany the area. And yet John had never heard of a lord being a proprietor of one before, nor had he ever wished for his coin to be used to build them. Mother knew very well what he thought of it all. Often it meant naught but a life of abuse and growing poverty for those involved. Whoremasters were nothing but scum looking to prey upon the vulnerable, those who had no family, wealth, or skill, even stooping so low as to pick out young children to force into prostitution. Besides, had she not been the one to throw such a fuss about his spending of gold on roads? Why do you think? I did it to protect you, Mother interjected defensively. Believe it or not, gold is not the only currency of value to a lord. You can be assured I take little pleasure from the means, but there is much that will be gained from my efforts. Furthermore, whorehouses will not suddenly disappear and neither will those girls, however much you wish it so. It may not be an easy life, but at least now they will not have to fear how they will be treated by some master who cares not at all for their well-being. They will be safer to practice and support themselves because of it. John supposed she was not entirely ungrounded in that thought process, as backward as it seemed. But I do not require any protection, he nearly tells her. Certainly none that stemmed from exploiting the misfortune of others. He had not failed to notice that her explanation had done precious little to explain how exactly owning brothels would possibly help him as she had claimed either. Nor did John have the care at the moment to find out what that was. Do what you will, Mother. Just so long as you do what is needed yourself. I will certainly have no part in this, he sighed, deciding to let the matter lie. Do you know where Lyra is? I have a little errand I must run and I thought I would ask if she would accompany me. Lyra's no. And then Elia, Arya, and I went to a Dornish festival. It was so much fun, she told him, holding her arms out to either side, carefully balancing herself with one foot in front of the other while skipping happily across the slender stone path above him. They had left their horses a ways back, trudging through a foot of snow to wherever John was taking them. There was dance and music and even a contest to see who could devour the most stuffed green peppers, but I could not stand that one. They coated them with snake sauce made of mustard seeds and dragon peppers and gods know what else. It burned my mouth terribly all night. Truthfully, I cannot imagine how they dine on such spice every day in Dawn. Though it would surprise you to know Arya nearly won the competition, even against all the grown Dornish men. But she did always have the oddest tastes. Remember that time she swallowed a living bug? Lia finally paused, remembering to breathe. She knew she was beginning to ramble, not to mention speaking far too fast for half of what she said to be intelligible, but she could not help it. This was the first time in weeks he had gotten a chance to truly talk to her as it were, and even here, walking with the wind blowing straight through her furs like ice daggers rather than warm in the castle, could not stop Lia from being glad for the chance. There was so much she had to catch him up on about her ongoings lest she forgets. I remember that well enough. Arya only did it because she knew it would make Sansa screech. Her twin acknowledged. But I am glad to hear you have both been enjoying yourselves. Lia, won't you come down from there and walk beside me proper? Jon calls out nonchalantly, one misstep and you shall split your skull. He misses me, she realizes his intent with a grin. And he cannot even help being rather obvious about it despite how much she knew he was trying to act too grown to care recently. Lia thought that to be rather adorable of him. That is why it is so much fun, she retorts playfully, obliging with his request anyway and sliding down with a laugh to walk at his side. She had missed him as well. It was not that she lacked diversions. In fact, after her lessons, Lia often found herself almost too busy with so much to do and so many girls of her age to keep her company, yet without nearly enough time to accomplish it all. But not even her suddenly blossoming sisterhood bond with Arya could fill the void that Jon had left completely. They had done so much together for so long after all. His mind seems 1,000 miles away, barred behind a look revealing no emotion. A mask she had noticed he had worn more and more of late. His lordly face, Arya had taken to mocking it teasingly. Still, it does not take much more than watching his arms fall tautly at his side for her to realize he was tense with frustration. She squeezes his arm supportively, letting their hands intertwine like she remembers doing once upon a time with her father, and she can feel him immediately relax. Is it very busy, she wonders out loud. Now that you are a lord? He halts in a moment of vulnerability, voice gruff. If I am being honest, sometimes it is hard to remember quite what it was like before I took up my seat. That was hardly fair, Lia thinks empathetically. He ought to be allowed to take some time off once in a while. Lyra Mormont still had time enough to spend half the evenings catching up with her despite all her duties, so why didn't he? But that wasn't her brother. Jon had always put so much on himself. Once he fixated on an idea, he just never gave it rest. She had noticed half these days he would wake with the day's first light and lock himself in his solar, not even bothering to break his fast with her and Arya. And gods only know at what late hour he slept. Jon could get so obsessive about seeing every detail through with little care of what it was doing to him, and Lia thinks that is the hardest part for her to watch. It wasn't healthy and he was going to burn himself out. There were dozens of people who were qualified to handle all this on occasion, from Uncle Ben to their mother. Did no one else care that he was only a boy? He should get to come to the fairs and festivals, explore the swamps, caves, and harbor and do whatever makes him happy. To refresh his mind and relax himself every once in a while if nothing else, and Lia silently vows to better her efforts to involve him in their excursions, even if she has to plead with him until he is sick of her. This place is much prettier than most of your lands that I see, she comments instead, finally catching sight of the village where they had stopped. Lia had found Moat Cailin to be a poor kingdom, not made for growing much, and yet here entire trees of fruit still stood high, few as they were in number. I am glad to hear you think so, Jon nods with a grin. I went through great care to separate this territory from the parcels that I had to give out. Why? She blinks in confusion at his look. Why do you think? It is yours, he informs her, handing her the binder full of papers from his arms. The surrounding 4,800 acres. Here is the full list of holdings. There is access to the river, a manor house, an orchard, and tenants who will pay rent. Land. She wonders suspiciously. And so suddenly. Lia is aware of enough custom to know high-born ladies aren't simply gifted hundreds of acres of land, at least not without some man to go along with it. And John knew she was a maiden flowered. She had complained to him only recently how much she hated that she had gotten her blood, perhaps against her better judgment. It is not a dowry, you silly girl, John clarifies as if he had read her mind, rolling his eyes upon seeing her expression turn guarded. This deed is and will always be in your name alone. You are free to settle it eventually. Or you could live in Moat Cailin and keep it as a summer home of sorts. And of course, if you marry a high lord far away one day I will handle the upkeep and it will turn into a source of income instead. The goods or corresponding coin will be sent wherever you have taken root for you to do with what you please. Tease a lot of land, is it not? She wonders hesitantly, her mind whirling from the surprise despite being relieved by his assurance. Good land. Not so much as any other. He shrugs offhandedly, but she knows him well enough to know he is lying. Lia loved John at that moment more than she ever had before, and she had always loved him with all her heart. She knows exactly what he has given her. A dowry belonged to whatever man a lady would wed. But to forever have something in her name, to use however she saw fit, it was the freedom she had always craved. Not even her sisters could ever dream of getting anything close if they were given something at all, and they were Starks of Winterfell. How many stories had she heard of young ladies being left to fend for themselves with whatever scraps their husband or father provided? It had always terrified her, in truth, the prospect of being forced to take some stranger to husband to better her family and suddenly having her entire livelihood at his mercy. She had told John so once in hushed whispers, while they lived in Bear Island. She could still recall how lonely and isolated the beautiful young Hightower bride had seemed when they had gone to live with their uncle, and Lia had immediately felt a measure of sympathy for her plight. Perhaps that had been why she had taken to keeping the older woman company so often, sharing the sweets or exchanging jewelry that her father and mother would send up and lending a listening ear that had earned her the former Lady of Bear Island's goodwill. Lia had admittedly not minded getting to hear all the choice gossip of the South either. Lady Lioness had confessed she had grown fond of Jorah too quickly and how it all seemed like a dream. She had been 7 and 10 and he had been famed as one of the finest knights in the realm, a war hero who had won a great tourney with her favor. Lord Lytton had agreed to give him her hand, finding him to be a chivalrous and valiant suitor while having no shortage of daughters. But the moment she had arrived north, reality had sunk in. Lia supposed Lady Lioness had been used to living lavishly, yet she had still tried to adjust the best she could to her new home, however hard it had been. She was just so different from the Mormonts. They had never wanted or attempted to understand her, and the most she had ever received from Old Town after her father had married her off had been the odd letter. Just like that it had all gone, her brothers and sisters and every familiar face she had known, the music she had loved, even the foods she had grown used to eating. It must have been so distressing to have lost everything she had known in an instant, have felt so secluded and confined, and have no choice but to stick with a husband who could not support her. But even he would not stick. He saw her unhappiness, and rather than being there for her while she came to terms with it all, he had taken it upon himself to leave her at Mormont Keep for months at a time when she needed him while surrounded by people who could barely tolerate her. She had watched as he lost tourney after tourney, sending them spiraling further and further into debt despite her attempt to nip it in the bud, and after he had tried to sell her jewels too, the last reminders of all that she had loved and left behind. She wondered sometimes whether Lady Lioness had been aware of her husband's transgressions. But even if she had, what could she have done when it was her word against his? That was the reality of life as a woman in a world fashioned for men, and she cannot imagine why anyone would want to put themselves through a burden like that voluntarily. If there was one thing she had taken from her father's loveless marriage, it was that she would suffer no similar fate. Getting wed seemed so dreary while remaining unattached so much better. By law, her husband would have every right over her. Even if he were kind-hearted and well-intentioned, she would still belong to him and for all purposes remain his property to do whatever to her he saw fit. And who was to say he would not simply change or reveal his true colors later? Lia had found there was simply too much fun to be had in life to risk such a consideration. She wanted to wear what she thought looked pretty, eat whatever she thought to be tasty, and live as she wanted with the whole world open to her. And if it was pleasure or companionship she craved, she could just take a paramour as necessary and have the much more preferable option of remaining her own person. I have already taken care to ensure that the families we have settled are ones we know, so you can be assured of their continued loyalty however far away you may go. John continued, and he likely would have prattled on further about all the measures he had taken had she not jumped him, sending them both crashing into a giant pile of snow. Thank you. She lays several soft kisses on his cheek with a blinding smile. For caring. You are truly the best brother a girl could have ever asked for. I just thought you ought to know that. His cheeks pinkened before he playfully knocked heads with her. You are not so bad yourself, lovely sister. Would you mind terribly if I asked you to return to the castle yourself? I still have an errand I must run, but you can tell mother I shall be home for supper. Jon Snow. Of the many Dornishmen that had once sat in the former Lord of Starfall's court, his lady mother had managed to convince several to come out of retirement and enter his service. But none had brought as much commotion to Moat Cailin as the shipwright who had been renowned throughout the Seven Kingdoms yet gone out of action for the better part of 2 decades. It was him that Jon had come to see in anticipation of the cuts that would be necessary if the Tyrells came back to him in acceptance of the deal. Not if, he corrects himself. When they came back. The roads would finish eventually, but Jon could not fill his grain stores at a loss for months waiting for that to occur. In the meanwhile, he had to cut back on Moat Cailin's spending, the most exorbitant of which he had unsurprisingly determined was their ships after a thorough examination of Moat Cailin's books. I cannot say I was expecting a personal visit from you, the shipwright said evenly, welcoming Jon in. And yet I am honored by it. How can I help Moat Cailin's young lord? You served my grandsire, did you not? Jon opens up. And it is said you build near every ship still in use in Starfall despite having stepped down over 5 and 10 years ago. I have gone through more records than I can count and I wished to get your advice. I just cannot understand why all these different ships must be built. Can I not simply use the ones I already have? That depends on the purpose they serve. He explains patiently. If you wish to cross dangerous waters you would prefer cogs or carracks. Cogs are sail-based ships, only needing a small crew allowing more room for goods. Carracks are larger, thus even more stable on the open sea. Galleys on the other hand are coastal vessels, powered by oars and swift to travel, best used to defend ports. So long as you are near land, their maneuverability is unmatched whatever conditions you are faced with. Across the realm, galleys reigned supreme. They were superior in warfare and easy to control on calm seas given they were manned by rowers. Jon currently had 4 of his own, split between both of its coasts. Fine ships yet based on the explanation perhaps not suited for what Moat Cailin required. I see. Jon ponders silently. Which would suit a need better in sailing the open sea, a cog or a carrack? That is simply a choice on what you prioritize. Carracks are safe yet far slower than the best merchants would like when transporting goods. Cogs are small, difficult to maneuver, and hostage to strong winds. That makes them easy prey for pirates on the stepstones, which is why trading galleys often accompany them when the cargo is important enough. Did he wish to sacrifice ships or goods was the question then, Jon understood. It was quite the quandary. A safe ship like a carrack that could last many years was more Jon's style, and yet, as an upcoming kingdom, the speed and promptness at which Moat Cailin could deliver their merchandise would be important to match their competition. There was also the fact to consider that 2 of the North's 4 most expensive commodities to be exported, ice and livestock, had a limited lifespan and were prone to spoilage, something which would make them a less than ideal fit. He knew the Red Wine fleet primarily used cogs to transport their goods alongside trading galleys as the shipwright had described. Sure, they might lose a galley or 2 every other trip across rough waters, but it was of little consequence to them when their merchant vessels numbered 1,000 strong, a sentiment Jon was not in a position to share. In contrast to most every other West AOC lord, actively dealing with Essos was far more critical to Jon's interests. Wealthy established houses only occasionally ventured to the open waters considering their treacherous nature and instead focused their efforts on trading within the 7 kingdoms, an attitude that may have found increased investment in voyages east not worth the investment. After all, even paying a premium on goods held benefits over the costs of dealing with pirates, choppy and rough waters with storms across the narrow sea. But unlike any of them, the stepstones were of no consequence to him. He had free rein to trade with Braavos and Pentos from Wintersport and approach lies from the west, rounding the corner of dawn. That was the benefit that came with controlling two connected coasts so long as his seaworthy ships could cover the extra distance. If he built cogs, perhaps that avoidance would be enough to get away with not having to send galleys to protect his goods, yet the practice of not protecting trading ships for ventures of such magnitude seemed unwise and potentially expensive. That is not good enough. John shakes his head. I need a better solution. I must be able to cross the narrow sea with great speed while not sacrificing my galleys in defense. Is there not a ship that can do both? If my lord knows better, the man asks dryly, and John can hear the dripping mockery in his tone. As if there was anything a boy of 2 and 10 could tell these men who had been building ships their entire life, especially when all he knew on the subject came from books. I do not deny your expertise in the matter, he accedes deferentially. That is why I have come to you for counsel. It had all started from a dream, John recalls. Just as Rhaenys had promised, his nightmares had long disappeared, yet in their place every night he now saw the same sight. A large ship with violet sails deep in the oceans, able to cross the ocean and sail up rivers alike. He had thought of doing nothing of it until a recent visitor had unknowingly given him more to go on. Take a look, he hands the shipwright a book. My Aunt Illyria was kind enough to drop off some of my mother's old belongings from Starfall on her visit, and I saw this in one of her diaries. He points to the drawings quite nearly like those in his dream, flipping through the pages. She drew it over and over again. It is the ship I want you to build. The little lady always enjoyed sketching all the boats that would come to the harbor. The shipwright sighed, somehow both sentimental and annoyed. She would spend hours sitting at the beach drawing everything that came to shore, and she wished for the same. I do not know why it surprises me that her son is just as stubborn and wearisome. This is a swan ship from the Summer Isles. They are as large as a carrack, swift as a cog, and maneuver with near the ease of a galley, but said to be put together with magic. Apart from the magic, that sounded just like what John had come for. A sail-based ship, far larger than cogs yet swift as a galley. And unlike its oar-based counterpart, he would not be reliant on manpower, which meant he had fewer men to pay and fewer supplies and food to be taken every trip. That meant larger cargo holds to let him transport a greater weight of goods in a single trip, as well as pack in as much as he could manage on a return voyage. He could use them in trading across the 7 kingdoms as well, no longer confined to the shore, and simply avoid the conflicts with Iron-born raiders that he may have suffered with galleys. After all, they were aggressive sailors whose longships were built for fast strikes along the coasts, not numbers against combat-ready ships on the open sea. It was the perfect way to move his mass-produced goods cheaper and more efficiently through the sea while keeping his operational costs lower. Then there was also the fact that true fleets were expensive to build and even harder to maintain. Unless you were a wealthy house like the Lannisters or Redwynes, or collecting tax from the entire realm like the Iron Throne, most could simply not afford such a luxury. John certainly could not justify the cost of building war galleys in great numbers for strength at sea when they were so limited for trade. And yet internal protection was a necessity. Nobody could trust the Ironman, peace or not, as the Mormonts could well attest to. With the large size and build of the new design, as well as a few trained archers and swordsmen, he could have his merchant ships double as a means of defense as well without the extra strain of cost. His more seaworthy vessels would serve far better than the galleys that were currently used as most of the realm's warships, and John could shift his galleys to purely safeguarding his ports and patrolling his coasts as they might be best served to do. Moat Cailin would hold the North's first true power at sea since Brandon the Burner. Would it be possible for you to design and make one based on this? I do not doubt it will be a tall order, and yet from the manner my mother speaks about you, if there is a man in the 7 kingdoms who could accomplish the task, I would believe it to be the one before me. I cannot see a reason not to, the shipwright aloud, scratching his beard thoughtfully. Though I can guarantee nothing. We will not know how it will hold up until it is already built. What would you require, he dives in, to build such a ship in reverse? Getting his hands on a functioning swan ship may be tough, John found himself imagining. Without the option of piracy, he would have to buy one outright. He did not know much about the Summer Islanders, but he did not think they would care to allow such easy spreading of their secrets. Whatever the prohibitions, it would be almost impossible to enforce, and yet purchasing one in the black market would prove a costlier proposition than John could afford. Only the laborers and material, the shipwright says, surprising him. That is all. He cannot help but ask, confused. I thought you would require a model. You do not need to buy the vessel to imitate some of its features, my lord, he shrugs matter-of-factly. That much can be done with skilled craftsmen and a purpose. Whichever corner of the realm, ships will always travel from place to place, and it is only natural for men to observe new designs. I spent 40 years as your grandfather's captain of ships. My shipbuilders performed repairs, unloaded cargo, and inspected for contraband even on swan ships. It may not be a replica, but all your needs should be met. A deep hull rather than a flat would make a ship capable of journeying safely through rough seas. Large triangular sails will allow ships to sail closer to the wind, even against it. If it is that simple, why has no one else copied it? John wondered. It seemed so primitive to him, relying on ships that forced them to hug the coastline and never once leave sight of land, as well as requiring trained rowers. John had assumed they were simply unable to mimic such a design, or that the cost to do so was not worth the effort, not that they actively chose to use flat-hulled ships instead. Could it just be that they just did not care to change? The Summer Islanders developed open-sea ships because they had no choice. They lived on islands and needed to travel the seas safely. But the lords of this realm simply did not care to explore the seas, nor did they prioritize trading with Essos. Instead, they remained mostly worried about protecting their borders and moving goods across their coasts. Who said they haven't? The shipwright declared. The Sun Chaser was a carrack of Bravo Sea design, custom built to sail open waters. The Sea Snake built a ship in his namesake that could do so when he desired it. The truth is, it is not the boat that is your bottleneck. Tell me, who are the most feared sailors in the realm? He asks. The Ironborn, John replies instantly. Yes, he agrees. The impoverished Ironborn who can scarcely find enough quality wood to build their primitive longships and yet survive and thrive in a realm of carracks and galleys. Because they are the ablest seamen. They have known and lived it all their lives. I could build you the finest ship that has ever existed, but it will do you little good, my lord. Because a ship is only as good as its captain. And for a deep-water sailing ship like the one you propose, they must be able to navigate using the stars, know how to wait for favorable winds, and a dozen such things. The best of them can even remember routes of trade winds, outgoing tides, and heat currents to reach the way of their destination while best avoiding becalming. You would not happen to know of any such captains, would you? John asks with a wince. I cannot say I do, he admits. And you will not find one in the Seven Kingdoms, that much I know. That is enough to make John hesitate. Something of the sort had always been in his plans, but he had intended to move through with a staggered approach. To build the roads and mills first and secure supply and distribution, and then use the savings to uplift transportation. You came here only in preparation to cut the wastage in their ships to support the Tyrell deal until the roads were complete, he reminds himself. Not at further costs. And yet now that he was here, he saw an opportunity. He could ill afford to continue to hold paying his people after offering work in the first place. That was a quick way to earn their resentment. The summer snowstorm was proving more detrimental than John had figured, and the mills did not offer enough work to support everyone. But the shipyard was well sheltered and construction could start even while the roads were delayed. Sure, his accounts may temporarily grow tighter, but if he could hold out when the ships and roads finished, Moat Cailin would be drowning in profit. Plans change, John tells himself. And I must adapt. The only question would be how to find someone capable of actually utilizing such a ship. John himself had only a few Bravo Sea contacts from existing trade deals he could reach out to, small as the pool was. But he just so happened to know someone who was as well connected to Essos as anyone in the Seven Kingdoms could be, the daughter of a powerful noblewoman in Volantis, the port city that had started as a Valyrian trading colony. Somehow, he thinks, it always came back to Nymeria Sand. Build the ships John commands. Moat Cailin will fund the construction, provide the material and pay the laborers. And I shall endeavor to find the right captain before it is complete. I just need one thing to go right, he sighs heavily, looking up at the sky. Is that so much to ask? 295 AC Highgarden. Margaery Tyrell. We really must find you a wife with due haste, Willers Margaery teases as they enter his solar. And why is that? To stop you from descending into this, she gestures to the cluttered pile of parchment that lies out of order around and under his desk, standing out in an otherwise well-kept room. It is such a mess. Ah, that he heeds, an embarrassed flush climbing up his neck. I confess the hour grew late as I was sorting through some affairs of commerce. That hardly surprised her. Willers was 21, keen of mind, courtly, and heir to Highgarden. Their Lord Father had long included him in his various proceedings, including filtering through pacts and negotiations that were not in their family's best interests as he was now. You kept this one, she indicates, picking up the loan letter unusually still atop his desk. Why? It comes from Moat Caillin's young Lord, Willers admitted quietly. Jon Snow. The entire realm had heard of Eddard Stark's natural-born son born on the Lady Ashara, whom the Warden of the North had granted a lordship to yet still refused to legitimize. Even to this day, the oddity remained a topic for jesters and fools to draw easy laughs. The bastard lord, they mocked. Every utterance that reached her ears left Margaery feeling a queer pity for this boy she had never met, that he put up with such ridicule for something out of his control. It was little different than how some spoke and thought of her brother after his mishap, as if he were somehow less for it. He has taken his seat for true then, she queries, intrigued. Is he quite so bright? As far as she recalled, he must have only been of an age with her, and it was proving difficult to imagine a boy given command of grown men. Apparently so, Willers shrugged. He is well read at the least, I can vouch for that much. His letter was clever and well informed. And he is offering a better rate for their livestock so long as we agree to continue to provide their grain on a fixed deal of 10 years. The deal is an outright bargain in truth. I have yet to see horses to match that caliber anywhere across the realm, let alone for such a price. If there was one subject Willers would know of better than anyone, it was animals of good breeding, so the decision seemed obvious to her. Highgarden was home to the finest knights in the realm, so why not ensure they would have the finest steeds? It seemed beneficial to grow their relations to the north when the chances arose. Isolated as they may be, it was said King Robert considered no one closer to him than the Lord of Winterfell. So why were they turning him down? Do you mistrust his words? Margaery wondered. Because he is a bastard. I wouldn't pay quite that much attention to your scepter. Willers smiled gently. Lord Snow sounds to be a man of integrity and honor. I do wish to bring my case to father on why we ought to support the deal, but his hesitance is a different cause and complicated. Lord Eddard Stark is the boy's sire, yet there are whispers he may be more his mother's son. There is little love between the Dornishmen and King Robert, and we would prefer caution when plans may see you in King's Landing. Add in Lord Renly's tidings. He paused, suddenly thinking better of his decision. Never you mind, Marge, such a topic is hardly fit for such sweet ears as yours. I would suppose not, she hums agreeably, and silence settles upon them. Willers, would you care to hear of the plans for my name day celebration that have been settled so far? Certainly, he allows, grimacing in pain as she takes hold of his cane and helps him to his seat. I can hardly believe you are 2 and 10 already. It seems only yesterday you were the little girl who would ask me to read stories. Does it not? She agrees pleasantly. And yet now there shall be a tourney in my honor. Garland has promised to name me Queen of Love and Beauty if he wins. So have Sir Horace and Sir Hobber. As they should, her brother adds. I am sure should anyone else win, they will not hesitate to do likewise. You are kind to say so, she beams. And then there will be the feast, of course. Mother has ordered the cook to prepare a 5-course meal. Vegetable soup, salmon, roasted boar, venison pie, and carrot cake frosted in sugar. That is much to imagine, Willers notes. Though I do quite enjoy carrot cakes. As do I. We must get that from our father. Margaery laughs. There will be sweet cider to drink. And a raised platform for the singers to preside over the dinner. After it is over we shall get to the surprise of gifts. Though I must confess I have already seen one, the dress I shall be wearing for the festivities. Would you care to show it off to me? He puts forward and Margaery grins, going to fetch the silk gown and sets it before him. Is it not rather lovely? She asks, unable to hide her genuine appreciation. The dress was a jade green satin with dagged sleeves of silver lace, modest yet thinly cut to still thrive in the heat of summer. The lining is Mirish lace, and mother proclaimed the color matched my complexion well as can be. And I would agree with her judgment, he declares approvingly. It is an exceedingly fine garment. It was a gift from Aunt Lyness, Margaery revealed. I had intended to send her a handwritten letter in thanks, and yet it appears I shall have the chance to do so in person when she arrives in a week's end. The Council of the Faith finally agreed to annul her marriage. I am sure Aunt Liness will be flattered that you will be draped in the gown of her choosing for the celebration, Willers remarked. If you will excuse me, sweet sister, I believe I must attend to something now. Shall we continue this later? By all means. Margaery accepts the dismissal graciously, as he kisses her cheek. Good night. I shall leave you to your duties. Good night, dear brother. She walks off, allowing a soft smile to grace her face as she imagines her brother hurriedly revamping his case. Willers would make a good head of Highgarden one day, just as grandmother always said, intelligent and level-headed as he was, but everyone could use a helpful nudge once in a while. To assuage their father's doubts about accepting this deal he favored, he would require more than figures and findings. He would have to prove without a doubt that Jon Snow offered merit to their standing, perhaps that he held the Warden of the North's favor as much as he did the Dornish. If there was any chance to do so, Margaery figured it would come from Aunt Liness, who had known the boy lord for years. It may not help his position at all, yet considering Old Town remained a steadfast partner of the Northern House and that her grandfather held tremendous sway, she thinks it could hardly hurt. If Willers had a good feeling about Jon Snow, that much was enough for her to do the little she could to help him establish this deal that would benefit them all. Yet there were admittedly heavier matters currently occupying her thoughts than Willers' pet project. She could read between the lines well enough to suspect what her brother would not say is that the Lord of Highgarden intended Robert Baratheon to set aside Queen Cersei for his daughter. It seemed quite the jump, yet she had thought it through and could find no other explanation. Their family had been in a precarious position since the rebellion, powerful enough to avoid consequences beyond the reach, paying heavier tithes to the crown yet still out of favor with the ruling house. It was why Loras had been sent to squire at Storm's End over 2 years past, after all. That prospect admittedly did little to enchant her, but if she was potentially being considered to be sent to King's Landing, it could only be because she was expected to offer companionship to the royal family. The prince, she had imagined at first, as he was near age with her, but then she had made notice that it had been the connection with the Dornishman to King Robert that had worried them. That the information could potentially be used by someone to color the king's perception of them. Her father had not accepted the deal offered by Moat Cailin, and yet neither had he taken up the counter that had been provided according to the letter, had that been accurate. If it had been Prince Joffrey he planned for her to take up with, he would have done so immediately to ingratiate them with the Lannisters. His caution meant he was wary, perhaps of Lord Tywin's reputation for retribution, and what cause would the Lord of Casterly Rock have to take offense other than his daughter being replaced with another queen? Margaery was nearly convinced, yet she could not be sure. She could imagine a dozen reasons why Lord Renly had suggested it, and she knew exactly why Loras wished for it, but why would father agree? Even if Lord Mace Tyrell had deemed the opportunity the best way forward for their family, he was not usually rushed to consider something as such without assurances, especially as Willers was sure to be pushing back against it. King Robert already had 3 healthy heirs, and it would mean war if they were passed over in succession. I must speak with grandmother, Margaery settles. Even if she was not aware, she would know what to do. The end.